The name Ludwig van Beethoven is etched in history as one of the greatest composers the world has ever known. His music continues to move, inspire, and challenge listeners centuries after it was written. But behind the brilliance lies a story that borders on myth. A man who, trapped in near-total silence, created some of the most powerful sounds ever imagined. It all began quietly. In 1796, Beethoven was just 26 when he noticed a persistent ringing in his ears. At first, he ignored it. Perhaps it was exhaustion, stress, or something minor, but the ringing never left. Soon, he found it harder to hear high-pitched sounds. Instruments like the flute and violin, voices that once soared in his compositions, began to vanish. It wasn't a sudden silence. It crept in slowly, like a shadow lengthening across his life. By 1801, at the age of 31, Beethoven could no longer deny the truth. In a heartbreaking letter to his friend Franz Wegeler, he confessed that his hearing was deteriorating rapidly. He withdrew from society, afraid his secret would be discovered. Social gatherings became torture. The once vibrant, witty man became isolated, frustrated, and often short-tempered. He feared ridicule more than anything else. The world around him grew quieter, and so did he. In 1802, his despair deepened. While staying in the village of Heiligenstadt, he penned a letter to his brothers, now known as the Heiligenstadt Testament. In it, he poured out his anguish, admitting he had contemplated ending his life. He couldn't imagine a future without sound, but something inside him resisted, a force stronger than fear, the need to create. And so he kept composing. In 1805, when he was 35, Beethoven premiered his opera Fidelio. He could still conduct, but barely heard the orchestra. By 1814, his last public performance as a pianist ended with him striking the piano so forcefully that strings snapped. Was it passion? Or was he simply unable to hear how loud he had become? 10 years later, in 1824, Beethoven stood on stage as his Ninth Symphony was performed for the first time. He was 54 and completely deaf. Unable to hear a single note, he stood with his back to the audience, conducting in silence. When the final chord of Ode to Joy rang out and the crowd erupted in applause, he remained unaware until a musician gently turned him around so he could see the standing ovation with his own eyes. That moment became iconic, and so did the myths. Some say he was born deaf. He wasn't. Others believe he lost his hearing overnight. In truth, it was a slow, agonizing decline. There's also the idea that he used some kind of hearing aid, but no such technology existed. He tried ear trumpets and strange mechanical devices to amplify vibrations, but none truly worked. And perhaps the most enduring myth of all, that a deaf composer couldn't possibly write great music. But Beethoven didn't just write. He transformed music. While living in silence, he composed the Missa Solemnis, the late string quartets, and of course, the Ninth Symphony. These weren't just pieces. They were revolutions. How did he do it? His greatest instrument wasn't his ears, it was his mind. Beethoven possessed a phenomenal internal auditory imagination. He could hear entire orchestras in his head down to the tiniest detail. To feel vibrations, he would bite on a wooden stick attached to the piano, using bone conduction through his jaw to sense the music. He may have still faintly heard low frequencies, but mostly he relied on his inner ear, the one no illness could touch. As his hearing faded, his style evolved. His late works sound different, deeper, darker, more daring. He leaned into low registers, used sudden dynamic shifts, and crafted melodies that seemed to come from someplace beyond sound. The music wasn't easy. Even today, some find his late quartets dissonant or strange. But within that strangeness lies raw, unfiltered brilliance. These were not polite salon pieces. They were the voice of a man screaming against silence and winning. Had he lived today, modern medicine might have changed his life. Hearing tests, scans, cochlear implants, all of it might have restored his hearing. But would his music have been the same? Without the silence pressing in, would he have reached such emotional extremes, such spiritual depth? It's impossible to say, and perhaps unnecessary to wonder. Because Beethoven's legacy isn't just about what he lost, it's about what he gave. He turned his greatest limitation into an unmatched source of strength. He adapted, endured, and created works that still shake concert halls and hearts alike. His life was its own kind of symphony, opening with promise, descending into silence, then rising into triumph. He became the voice for those who have none, the sound for those trapped in quiet. So when you hear his music, the aching first notes of the Moonlight Sonata, the electric charge of the Fifth Symphony, the universal call of Ode to Joy, you're not just hearing melodies, you're hearing courage, you're hearing a man who refused to go quiet, a man who, in absolute silence, composed the sound of the human soul.